So, welcome to this Max City VOW Litfest. As always, great pleasure to have. And I'll sort of request you to make some opening remarks to give us a frame of reference, and then we can take it further from there.
Thank you so much for having me here. This is the first time I'm doing this, so it's new to me. Just as a frame of reference, of course, we said I'm the flag officer commanding-in-chief of the Western Naval Command. Of course, I got about half of the Navy's resources under my command, and a very huge responsibility. Even as we speak, there are a number of ships of the Western Naval Command that are deployed. So we are the implementing arm of any national policy in the ocean, and so obviously these are challenging times for the world. Very challenging time for the region, certainly challenging time for India. People will talk to me about the war. Of course, I don't know very much about the war. This is not our war. We are a neutral country. We are just watching the war like everybody else in the world. But we know that this war has very, very serious implications to our economic well-being, certainly to our energy security. And so, if there's anything that you'd like to know about me, the way I understand it, my job and my contribution to my command's contribution to the energy security and the rest of it, I'll be very happy to do it, to answer those questions as well. Srikant, because I normally I don't know if I'm good at these kind of things, but Srikant summoned, so we just have to come. So I just come here as some kind of an unwilling participant. So just pardon me if I say something that's somewhat dull and boring, because that's the kind of person I am. But Srikant, let's take on the questions.
So you've got a canvas that is vast. How do you fill the colors in it every day?
We've got three commands: the Western Command, the Southern Command, and the Eastern Command. The Southern Command for us is a training command, and training is a very, very important peacetime activity for us. We've got something like 33 or 34 what we call Cat A training establishments. And we did the Southern Naval Command much later in our evolution as a Navy, perhaps in the mid-80s, where we felt that training was too important a discipline to be left to happen by itself. So we wanted it to be headquartered and controlled and overseen by a command. So we did the Southern Naval Command to be a training command. The Western Naval Command and the Eastern Naval Command are operational commands. And if you draw a vertical line through India, through the peninsula, and drop it down straight from Kanyakumari all the way up to Antarctica, everything to the west of that is my operational jurisdiction. It works out to something like 38,000 million square kilometers, but that's huge. That's a huge ocean space that in which I don't have to be there every single day of my life, or me or my ships. But that is the operational jurisdiction, and it's a neat division of responsibility between the Eastern Naval Command and the Western Naval Command. While the Western Naval Command is seen in our own scheme of things as some kind of a more busy command, is simply because of the complexity of the maritime environment. Of course, throughout our history, we've had Pakistan as as an unfriendly neighbor. We've had a lot of things happening in the Middle East, the Makran coast, the Oman coast, Yemen, South Yemen, the Gulf of Aden, east coast of Africa, all the countries. There have been a lot of impoverished populations there. There have been a lot of security hotspots. And so, because of the immediacy of the threats that we face on the Western Command, on the Western Seaboard, the Western Naval Command has been relatively more active. Certainly, it is a historical fact that we have done most of the heavy lifting of all security operations on behalf of the nation for everything. So, anytime there is any kind of national security contingency, there is any kind of national security situation, the Western Naval Command mobilizes, because throughout our history there has been a pattern. It is almost inevitable for us to have been able to trace it down to either Pakistan or Pakistani proxies or something of that kind. So we have always mobilized. We always mobilize, even in anticipation of something that happens there. Much of our trade, all of us know this, about more than 90% of our trade by volume and more than 70% by value is seaborne. And so we are extremely trade dependent for our economic well-being. And much of the trade comes from sea. So keeping the sea lanes safe, keeping the sea lanes open, keeping the international environment in the ocean safe, stable, and somewhat predictable is something very important for the normal transaction of commerce. So stability, security, predictability happens. At least in our experience, these kind of things cannot be taken for granted. We don't assume these things simply because we want them. We have to ensure that these things happen, and we ensure that it happen by doing the hard work. We are deployed there every day. We have units positioned in various vantage points. Because we track developments in the Indian Ocean region, we keep a very high level of what we call maritime domain awareness. It's important for us to know who enters the Indian Ocean region, who exits it, where do they come from, where do they go, which is the last port of call, which is the next port of call, what cargo they carry, who is the cargo meant for, and all of that. We keep track of all of that. And we keep some kind of a transparency of every person, every ship present in the Indian Ocean region. It's not easy, and it's not that we do it perfectly, but we do it very, very well. We've got a bunch of people who are doing exactly that. Maintaining maritime domain awareness is a 24/7 by 365 job, and we deploy a lot of resources to know exactly what's happening. Once we do that, it's not very difficult for us to, and also because we keep track of international events, it's not very difficult for us to figure out which might be the hotspots, the potential hotspots, or the trouble spots. And we've adopted a philosophy of what we call mission-based deployments. This we did, this adoption of these mission-based deployments predates all the wars of the recent wars. This war, certainly the Russia-Ukraine war, it predates, the Israel-Hamas war, the action of the Houthis in the Red Sea and the Bhabha Straits. It predates all of that, so we know where the choke points are. Choke points, of course, are a fact of life. Geography is the reality of life. We recognize our geography. We keep our ships deployed in various geographical hotspots so that we understand the geography, we understand the happenings there, we understand who's coming, who's going. And so when something does happen, we don't have to go and discover things there. We're already up to speed and we just have to go and act. So all of this happens, in the dull, routine day of everyday life of the Western Naval Command. There are troops, there are ships, there are submarines, there are aircraft that do that every single day. We compile a picture so that we have a very good understanding of what is happening, so that if something does happen and the nation does require us to react, we are there, we are up to speed, we know exactly what needs to be done. In all of that, I think the biggest concern that I have as an operations commander is that I got to make sure that my ships, submarines, aircraft, special forces are all maintained at some good level of operation readiness so that when the call comes, we don't have to waste a lot of time getting ready. If you're not already pre-positioned there, then we're certainly ready to go, and we can position ourselves in a hotspot in a matter of a day or so. So I think maintaining, recognizing A, the responsibility that is vested on us, B, recognizing the dynamics of the geopolitical environment, the geostrategic environment, the geo-economic environment in our vicinity, trying to recognize if there's a hotspot somewhere and being able to pre-position there is something that we do every day of our lives. And we've got a very good record of responding correctly to all kinds of international situations on time. There are two things that describe us. We like to describe ourselves the way we see our self-image as a Navy. One, of course, we call ourselves a preferred security partner, which actually means that there are plenty of smaller Indian Ocean states that have the same kind of concerns in the oceans or similar concerns as us. We recognize that because the seas are contiguous, what is happening there will take no time to happen here tomorrow. They have the same concerns, but they don't have the capacities or the capabilities to contribute to security, so they look for help. And when they do look for help, we want them to look towards us rather than looking towards somebody else. So we like to position ourselves as a preferred security partner. And we hope that because of a combination of the hard power and the soft power that we represent as Indians, they will come to us rather than going to somebody else. And the second element of our self-image that we have is that we like to be the first responder, which means we track any kind of contingencies, any kind of HADR tasks, any kind of natural calamities, and we like to pre-position ourselves with the material that matters to people, so that if something does happen and somebody is looking for help, they are already there in the first responder, so that we take that responsibility as being a big nation and a relatively big navy in the area to do that. So doing that as well, is part of our mission set. So we engage with our partner countries every single day. We do everything that Srikant said just now. We show the flag, we engage with them on a daily basis, and we feel that the time to establish good relationships with our partner navies is every single day. So that when the time comes, we don't waste time in getting to know each other. We already can put a face to a name and a name to a face. We just pick up the phone and say we want this, and we're there. So all of this takes a lot of hard work. Unfortunately, some of this, or maybe all of it, is not done in public there in public gaze. So a lot of people don't know about it. And for good reason, the Navy is known as a silent service because whatever we do is well beyond the horizon of the normal human engagement on the land. So I think it's occasions like this where we can come out and speak a little about what we do in our daily lives and why it matters to the nation and why it matters to you. So thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here to explain that.
Lovely. So, lots of young people, the students sitting in the audience, they wonder that if this is your description of a dull routine day, what would an exciting day be like? So let's come to some of that part. I mean, you said lots of things from trade protection to maritime domain awareness to our own self conception of how we see, and of course the geography and what's happening, how geography bears upon things Navy. But this has been a rather interesting last few months or last year, and you made a reference to that initially. So you had the Sankalp, and then you had Operation Sindoor when you were the vice chief, and you were watching them from the apex levels, so to say. Operation Sindoor unfold, the Navy was almost, it was up there. And then now you have the crisis, the war that's happening in West Asia, and India, not a party to the war, but since we are concerned about our energy security, having deployed our ship. So, give us a bit of sense of this frisson or excitement, or how is the Navy handling all of this?
That's a great question. What happens at sea? We live in an interconnected world. And the economy of the world is, in a way, is interconnected and is globalized. Firstly, of course, we recognize that any conflict in this today's interconnected world, it's extremely difficult to keep it contained in the location where it takes place. It's almost certain that places far away will have very serious repercussions because they're an interconnected world. Our economies are interconnected, and so obviously, this war is not our war. This war, we are in a neutral country. All the belligerents in this war are friendly countries to us, and we have no stake in this war. Of course, we want this war to end as soon as it can. Our national leadership, our Prime Minister has gone on record and said several times that obviously this conflict needs to end, and it needs to end through diplomacy and dialogue. But in the meantime, every single day we've got to make sure that our interests are protected. A war zone itself is a very, very unpredictable zone. You don't know what extent it has. You don't know who's shooting whom. There are a lot of dangerous things flying all over the place. It's not a very good and conducive environment for international commerce. And that's where ships, they can't sail. In their normal life, they have an insurance policy. They need to get a war-related, war risk insurance premium taken on that, and it's huge. There are a lot of ships that are stuck upstream from the Strait of Hormuz. They need to come to Indian ports, and they need to come out. There are something like 3,000 or 4,000 ships internationally that are stuck there. So if that kind of supply chain disruption is what we are seeing, then clearly it has ramifications for all of us. So these are interesting times, and not just us. There are several like-minded navies that are invested in keeping their presence there in the North Arabian Sea and trying to protect their own interests. Of course, the war is being the war is being fought from the North Arabian Sea. So there are a lot of belligerents. And so for us, the challenge is to keep away from the war, stay in the war zone, not interfere with the war, make sure we are protected, make sure our shipping is protected, and engage with the warring people at various levels. I know that the political leadership is engaging with all kinds of, one of course, the belligerents themselves, but certainly several like-minded countries. The Navy, at a level much higher than mine, is also engaging with a lot of people. But as an operational commander, I'm a soldier. I've got a task. I've got my troops, and my task is to remain present there and just make sure that we can contribute as much as we can to the stability, so that not just our ships and ships that have gone to our port come back, but if any other ship needs a little bit of predictability and stability, we are able to contribute to that as well. We've learned a lot of lessons. If the question is what lessons have we learned about the war itself, we've learned a lot of lessons. We're taking them on board. We've been studying the Russia-Ukraine war for several years. It's come to the 5th year now. We studied the Israel, Hamas war. There's a tenuous ceasefire there, and we're studying the current Israel-US-Iran war as well. So there are a lot of lessons for us to take home, and we can talk about that. But certainly these are interesting times, and we are engaged. One of us, and it's so dynamic. I mean, every day we see a new change, we see a new frame of reference. We are working in a new context every single day. So just aligning ourselves and adapting to what's happening, is something that's engaging us. But we just need to do what we need to do. We don't control much of what happened in the war, but we ought to control what we should, which is our own preparedness, our own ships, submarines, aircraft, and men. And so, as far as I'm concerned, the task somehow, through all of that, the complex maze of activities that happen in North Arabian Sea, my task is simply to maintain a high level of operational readiness, be present in strength, and be able to respond to the nation's requirements whenever I get a call.
Wonderful. Now, you mentioned a very key element, and I think this is what most naval officers automatically do. We talk about protection of trade, protection of our shipping. And one of the possible consequences of this war, at least in India, is that people have become more aware of the maritime domain. It is now being said that people who were not aware of where Mahim Creek is now are aware of the Strait of Hormuz. So at least that kind of maritime geography has. And since you speak about trade protection, I mean, normally it's a very unsexy, very unglamorous thing, but navies do that for a living. Since you mentioned last about lesson and your own gaze as an academic, how India is positioned in the Indian Ocean, talk to us a bit. I mean, here I'm talking to the PhD scholar too, a little bit about geopolitics in this region and how geography both blesses us, but at the same time imposes this huge responsibility upon us.
There is one explicit question and there's an implicit question. Let me answer the implicit question first. I'm one of those guys who doesn't know where Mahim Creek is, but I live in the state of Homi every single day of my life. It's simply because I think I don't have the time to go to Mahim Creek, but I have the necessity of looking at the state of Hormuz every day. That, of course, as an aside. Geography is a reality of life, and choke points are the reality of geography. And so, anybody who makes any kind of assessment of the threat perception of international geopolitics needs to first, be cognizant of geography. I mean, geopolitics is not geopolitics without geography, and so geography plays a huge role in whatever nations do. I think the subcontinent itself, the geography is not, in a way described just by the physical features, but it's also described by the people, the populations, the people who came, the rulers, the cultures that are filtered down, generation and generations of people. And of course, now the history, recent history, and also recent history of domination that this region has had by external powers for something like centuries. Certainly, we are seeing a resultant of all of that in the 21st century, where we see a lot of impoverished populations, a lot of war-ravaged populations living in the littorals of the Indian Ocean region. And so, where there are historical animosities, historical enmities that have not found successful resolution, they've been carried forward for centuries. They have been suppressed somewhat by some foreign rulers. The foreign rulers have left. So some of those conflicts that have been suppressed artificially for centuries, they are finding new life and coming up now. So there is huge potential for interstate conflict. There are a lot of impoverished populations. There are a lot of vested groups. There are a lot of interest groups. There are a lot of ethnic groups that have formed non-state entities by themselves. There are a lot of people who are fighting for entities. There are a lot of people who are very concerned about religious and religious affinities and those kind of things. So I think our region is a complex mix of nations, peoples, ethnicities, problems, both that are recent and some that have been carried forward from history. And it doesn't help that we're also a region that is blessed heavily with resources, oil resources. So we undoubtedly have the potential of being a hotspot for terrorism, non-state actors, and all of that. But we also have a lot of riches which bring the international game to us. There's a lot of international presence. So it's a very challenging environment in which we reside as an India that is growing and that is focusing a lot on its internal development and needs to engage the rest of the world. It's also a very challenging geography in which the Indian Navy is deployed now, because much of what I said can describe the whole arc. It goes from the Indian coast to the Makran coast, to the Iranian coast, into the entire Gulf, comes down to the Oman Yemenis coast, and all the way down to the East African coast. So it's a complex geography. There are people who have various kinds of problems. There are nations that have various kinds of problems. There are nations that are carrying animosities from historical times. There is international interests. There are extra-regional interests, and that is where the Navy has to operate every single day. For the last maybe 20 or 25 years, right from the time of the global war on terror, we have something like 20 or 25 navies always positioned in the North Arabian Sea in strength. The count at the peak of it went to something like 90 or 100 international vessels being positioned there. Today we've got something like 50 vessels. So there is a lot of international interest. This is a region which exports a lot of its commodities to other regions. A lot of other regions are dependent. A lot of import-dependent countries, import-dependent economies are dependent on the stability of the Indian Ocean region, because there is that. So there is a lot of mix of trade, choke points, geopolitics, international interests, impoverished populations, a mix of state and non-state actors. It's very complex and muddy, and that's where we operate. So I think these are interesting times. How we're going to evolve, we don't know. But this evolution process has started 50 or 60 years from 50 or 60 years back. We continue to evolve. We certainly see this war as some kind of inflection point. We can talk about it if we want, because this is unprecedented. And my own guess is that being some kind of a small student of international politics, the world is going to change very, very significantly after this war. I don't know how it's going to end and when it's going to end, but certainly the way we see international institutions, we see the established global order, we see established nation states, we see alliances that are so predominant in international relations these days. We see much of that changing, and we're going to see the emergence of a new order where we're going to be new people, we're going to be new formations, new alliances, and we'll be unwise not to recognize what's happening and position ourselves correctly as India, as a nation that's growing in stature, that's growing in economy, that's growing in international politics, that's growing in its own aspirations, that's growing in self-image. So we need to position ourselves correctly so that when this war is over and everything settles, we find ourselves in a position of advantage.
So you brought out 2 or 3 wonderful things. You said this is an inflection point, and you also said we can talk about it if you want. I mean, I'm not going to look a gift horse in the so we certainly would like to talk about it, because your perspectives on that are important. And there's a reason I asked this last question is because at the end of the day, Max City is about geopolitics. We wanted to bring geopolitics to Mumbai, geopolitical discussions to Mumbai. So we'll be more than happy to hear about your take on how this war is sort of changing some of the way, whether it's reordering international relations or the international world order, or it has certain operational lessons in terms of technology and other things. Well, I'll be happy to hear more if you'd like to deviate a bit more.
So certainly, this is a very dynamic world that we live in now. The contours of what the world might be maybe 10 years from now or something, we don't know. But what we certainly know what we certainly know is the relationship between the United States and NATO, for example, is being challenged, and that needs to be sorted out at the end of this war. The relationship among the Gulf countries itself is being challenged in a way. They had a certain model, even if it was an uneasy peace. There was peace. Now how that's going to turn out, we don't know. India's relationship with the United States, with Israel, with Iran, we've kept them all as friends. We want to continue to be friends with all of them. How we, managed to do that after the war is going to be a challenge. The economies of plenty of countries now, we are having the Russia-Ukraine war that has entered its fifth year. Europe, the whole of Europe has been heavily invested in it in terms of soldiering, in terms of technologies, in terms of weapons, sensors, in terms of making contributions. That war has gone nowhere. This war has come on the heels of that war. So there's a lot of international investment that's going into fighting wars. If this war should be inconclusive, like we think it would be, because there are no easy answers, there's going to be no clear winner or loser in this war as it looks today, then a lot of resource will have been spent with no significant outcome. That is the first bit. The second bit is the war has disrupted normal international commerce from a place that's so important for the world economy. So there are a lot of nations that would inevitably suffer because of the disruption. The Gulf countries alone, if you take their case, they all import dependent. They are a single commodity economy. They need to export. They're not able to export. They import everything that they use in the daily life. They're not able to import as well. This is a short term. This is at the moment it's just been a month. It should continue for a month or two more. Then will the disruption reach a level where they find it very, very difficult to bounce back? We don't know. How long the repercussions of this are going to be, we don't know. What we do know is that plenty of economies are going to suffer. How they're going to regroup and how they're going to do that, we don't know. In the meantime, plenty of international alliances. President Trump has made a door of peace. He's just gathering people like that. There are a lot of unseen people that are jumping onto that bandwagon. They don't seem to be natural alliance, but they're all opportunistic. They're getting there to find an opportunity to sort it out. How that is going to pan out, we don't know. President Trump, when he finishes his tenure, how that will end and where will that end, we don't know. Certainly, there are a lot of uncertainties about the current situation. Much of it is evolving. We don't know what direction it's going to take. But what we do know now is that plenty of our assumptions on international geopolitics, international trade have been challenged now. We need to be very, very sensible to regroup and give that the correct direction. It's very easy for a miscalculation, miscommunication, misreading of the situation to lead us to a different path. But certainly, I think much of how international politics has been conducted for the last 5 or 6 decades, the established order, all of that is coming under great challenge. The whole concept of freedom of navigation, as mariners, the whole concept of freedom of navigation, the global commons, that has come under challenge. So how do we re-establish that? How do we re-establish a multilateral organization that can sort out the conflict between the global good and national interest? Here there's a big challenge. There's a big conflict between the global good and national interest. If everybody continues to follow the national interest, then who will think about the global good? And how do we re-establish the faith of people in multilateral organizations, where multilateral organizations haven't done anything to either cap the conflict or contain the conflict or stop the conflict? So the international organization in which we have been invested for 5 or 6 or 7 decades, they haven't been able to shape the conflict the way they want. The conflict has gathered a life of its own. So it's all challenging. So that's why I think it's, sometimes all of us, when all of this is done and over with, we need to sit and find out where we are and figure out a new direction we've got to go. This, of course, is not just a region but the entire world.
Take a couple of questions. So we can't. I think the audience would look at opportunities to sort of ask some questions to the CNC. We can't obviously see the number of hands. He'll have to stay here till midnight. But we take one from you, and then I'll be democratic. I'll go that side. I saw one more hand here.
Hello, Admiral. I'm Rohan Tilu from Maharashtra Times. My question is...
Is this a media question or an audience question?
Audience question. So you talked about the changing world order. How you see the future of United Nations and organizations such as United Nations in this changing world order?
Firstly, I didn't speak about the changing world order. I'm not competent to do that. I just said this is one of the possibilities that stares us in the face. I'm not competent to speak about the United Nations. Obviously, by the way, the United Nations was created to stop conflict. That is the main purpose. And the United Nations has not stopped conflict. And where it concerns the superpowers, of course, and the P5 countries, the United Nations has been able to do nothing. So in a world like that, you have a supranational organization that can rein in the superpowers. We've not had that in our, from the time the United Nations was founded. So we don't know what it does. The United Nations does a lot of other fabulous work, but it's not been able to stop conflict. We have seen conflict continuously. After the war, after the World War, we haven't had what we call organized, declared wars, but we've had conflict and we've had death, destruction, and all of that. So obviously, as an independent citizen of a country that's free thinking, we need to think about organizations that can arbitrate, for example. Is the only arbitration between two countries possible a war? Is that the only arbitration possible?
US Navy has a personnel called Marines. US Navy. Now, I don't see any of the other navies all over the world don't have any Marines. So what the Marines do, and is the India have the need to have a personnel like the Marines? What the Marines do? That is what I want to know.
Should we have the Marines?
So the word Marines means differently to different people. The US has what they call the US Marine Corps, which is special forces who operate at sea and from the sea. Every nation builds the armed forces that it needs, and the armed forces are not built at random. We build the armed forces based on the purpose we want the armed forces to fulfill. In our system, we've not had the need to have any Marines, but we've got a rough equivalent of that. We call it the Marine Commandos, the Marcos, and those are very, very specialized forces. They're the special forces. They're part of the Navy, and they do some very specialized work for us. As far as we are concerned, we are organized by the Indian Army, the Indian Air Force, and the Indian Navy. We've got these three arms of the defense forces. We've got several of the armed forces, and I think at the moment, the general understanding is that these forces are enough for us to look after our security interests. But we don't need a Marine Corps at the moment.
So Venkatesh, and then that gentleman. Venkatesh, you had a question. Yeah. And then you, and then I'll come back. Oh, someone. Ravi, okay. So all three from you. Okay, Ravi, go first.
Thank you for your service. Thank you all. Two incidents in the waters recently which I wanted to have your thoughts on. One is we had a couple of vessels carrying LPG and you had the guts to escort such a highly inflammable vessel, and that one vessel of 92,000 tons of LPG covers just 1 day of India's consumption of LPG. So that takes a lot of guts. So I salute you and thank you. But why would you do that? That's real guts and risk. That's one thing I wanted to comment on. And the other thing is in the Indian Ocean. Recently, America, with great arrogance, said they shut down an Iranian vessel in the Indian waters. What is our responsibility, I mean yours specifically, in such a scenario? Because it's very tricky if you defend and you don't defend.
So thank you. Those are very interesting questions. Firstly, I don't deserve any credit for escorting those ships. I haven't been there physically there. But it's a fact that those LPG tankers are relatively safe. They're safe to be transported, and that's why they come by ship. What might happen is if they're hit, then they become very inflammable. But otherwise they're reasonably safe, and because they're reasonably safe, they're transported on ships. Just as an aside, you might be interested to know that one of the things we did, the Western Naval Command of the Indian Navy, a couple of years back was there was a ship that was on fire, and it was carrying naphtha, which is a highly inflammable material. And there was one part of the ship that was aflame, and that ship called out for help. And we sent our people. We went and boarded the ship, and we boarded the ship that was burning and that had the potential to explode, and we put out the fire. I know a lot of navies. that operate in that area, and a lot of navies that could have answered the call for help. I say with a lot of pride that it's only your navy. That does it. In all the navies that I've seen in that area, there's only one navy that sticks its neck out and goes and puts its own personnel at risk to do what it thinks is good. And we have done that consistently over the last 3 or 4 years. We have gone, we are there on an anti-piracy mission. It doesn't matter whether the pirates have taken an Indian ship or some other ship. If a call for help has come, we have gone and intervened. There are a lot of navies there that don't intervene because they don't expose the people to risk. And we have done it not just once, we've done it multiple times. So I think that gives us a lot of satisfaction. And for the people who watch these kind of things, I think part of the reason why they hold us in very high regard and respect is simply because we do that. We just don't talk, we also do. So we have to do that. The LPG tanker, it's important. Our LPG requirements are huge. One tanker is of course a drop in the ocean, like you rightly said, but the tanker matters. And it matters to us that the sea lanes are open, even during the conflict. And it matters to us that we're able to escort the ship back to safety to Indian waters. So obviously, we don't go on, we don't want to get into a conflict zone because the potential for misidentification, miscalculation, is huge. And we don't want to be in the middle of a shooting match and get shot at. And then if we get shot at, we shoot back. It'll be a very, very unseemly situation. So we don't want to do that. There are a lot of talks and a lot of people talk, and then of course we know the location of every single merchant ship that is even upstream from the state of Hormuz. We are talking to them constantly. They come a certain distance, we come a certain distance. The war zone of course extends much beyond the state of Hormuz, but we escort them safely and bring them there. That's our task. That's what we're trained to do, that's what we're able to do, and that's what we want to do. And that's what we're very happy to do. That's what we did. In terms of the vessels that got sunk on the Sri Lankan coast, for us, it's a very sad incident for any warship to get sunk, because finally, we are soldiers, we just do what our nations want us to do. And when any soldier of any country, in a ship is going on an innocent passage, he's struck and we lose lives, it's a sad thing. In these kind of situations, what is the right thing to do? What is the best thing to do? What is the nice thing to do? And what is it that you can do that you can legally justify? The answers depend on who you are, where you stand, and what your interests are. It is the fact that there was a war on, and there were two belligerents, and one platform of one belligerent was there, and the other platform, the other belligerent was within shooting range, and he shot him. Should he have shot him? Could he have done it in a different way? These are questions we can ask and discuss ourselves. But he found an opportunity and he shot the vessel. It's a sad thing. It's a fact, of course, that the vessel was coming back after an engagement with us. But we had there is no obligation of any country to protect any other country's warship. A warship is a standalone platform. The moment it casts off from harbor, it's on its own. So that ship was just returning on a return passage. There was never any expectation or any obligation of that ship being protected by us or Sri Lanka or anybody else. It happened in our waters. It happened after an event that a ship attended with us. Is a sad thing for us. But there was nothing legally wrong about what happened. And of course, much as we may not have wanted it to happen, there were two belligerents and one took a shot. So it's an unfortunate accident which just happened. Not an accident, unfortunate incident which just happened to take like that.
Quickly.
Is it audible?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a very naive question, more out of ignorance. In the current state of blockade, which is one specific point in geography, how relevant is the ancient route around the coast of Africa? Is it operationally feasible? Does it have costs, benefits, risks, or that option does not exist at all?
No, it does. It does. So the international trading system has settled into a very beautiful pattern of dependencies, sea lanes, sources of supply, supply chains, and all of that. That is being disrupted, but that has been set up, over a period of time. And now of course because that is set up, people are expecting this to be a short duration thing. A lot of vessels are stuck. If this continues for a long time, nations need to survive. They need to exist, and trade needs to continue. In terms of transportation economics, they say the most commercially and economically viable means of carrying out trade is through the sea. And just by means of numbers, I understand it's something like 95% cheaper to transport this bottle by sea than it would be to transport it by road, and it's about 80% cheaper to transport the same bottle by sea than by rail. Also, as a matter of general interest, it is much cheaper to transport this bottle from Shanghai to Rotterdam, which is about 20,000 kilometers, than it would be to transport this bottle from its manufacturing plant in Delhi to a showroom in Bombay, which is just 1,400 kilometers by road. So by transportation economics, going by sea, so it is there. And therefore, you will identify your sources of supply. And if your sources of supply are threatening themselves, then you will find an alternative source of supply. And an alternative source can come from the Cape of Good Hope around Africa. They have done that. So there was a period of time in which the Houthis, who are positioned in south of Yemen, they endangered the Bab el-Mandeb Strait that connects the Indian Ocean, the Gulf of Aden with the Red Sea. And so a lot of international shipping just didn't come through the Suez Canal. They took the penalty and came down the continent of Africa and took the route around the Cape of Good Hope. So people will adapt, if that happens. People are just hoping that this is, a short-term situation will get over so they can resume the same trading routes. But if it happens, I'm pretty sure it happens for some more time, then people find new routes.
I'll give the last question to you because you've been very persistent.
And patient.
Absolutely patient too. So
It's an absolute pleasure to have heard you expressing so many things. Very simple question. Warfare has always been changing, but the pace at which it is changing in past 5 to 10 years is phenomenal. Growth of AI, drones, etc. So my question is this: having got the experience of the naval specific battles which have taken place in our neighborhood around the world in past 5 to 10 years, our procurement processes are pretty slow. And once you procure, training processes are again a long haul. How, as a FOCNC Western Naval Command, since you have a huge area, you have a huge responsibility, how do you make sure that today's operations are in line with the threats that are emerging from drones, from generative AI for decision support systems, and from AI for offensive cyber operations, which I'm sure you are facing on a day-to-day basis? How do you make sure that you are up to date with these emerging threats, is my question.
So please identify yourself.
So I'm Colonel Dheeraj Dabure. I'm an Army veteran, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very, very important question. Please give me 2 minutes to answer that. The phenomenon that we see now is what we call democratization of technology. The technology life cycles these days are, depending on what technology we talk about, it's about a year and a half, 2. So there's tremendous, technology is galloping at some tremendous pace. And that technology is finding, its manifestation in various kinds of implements of war. Drone warfare is one. And drone warfare has been very successful in the Russia-Ukraine war. We've seen once again in this war. Low cost, high impact, highly deployable, lightweight. It makes sense. But when we build capability, sometimes it takes a long time, and because of the industry, and if you want to build a ship, for example, it takes years. Uh, the the construction life cycle of a ship, could actually extend beyond the life cycle of several technologies. So when you build a ship, you need to build a ship for a broad spectrum of capabilities. It can't be for a particular capability because you take about 10 years to build a ship, and the ship is going to be in commission for 30 or 40 years. So when you build a ship, you try and give the ship the capabilities that you think the ship would require for its entire life cycle. And every naval ship, in our Navy at least, undergoes what we call a midlife upgrade, where in the middle of the life of the ship, we infuse new technologies to the extent that we can without having to necessarily rebuild the ship. So building a ship is a risk decision that we take at various levels. But, there's a bunch of people in our Navy who, all our capability building is based on what we call a maritime capabilities perspective plan, which is a 15-year roll-on plan. And we think a 15-year is a reasonable time horizon for us to consider at one time. There is a bunch of people who are already who are always looking at a 15-year time horizon. And their job is to see where the Navy is now, where the Navy is going to be 15 years from now, where the nation is now, where the nation is going to be 15 years from now, what the world is going to look like 15 years from now, who are going to be our friends, who are going to be our adversaries, what are the challenges that are going to be thrown at us, what technologies we may have. So you take all that into consideration and you define the ship that you want to build, what you want to have 15 years from now today. You do that. It is not to say that that ship will be all singing, all dancing when it's commissioned. But the basis on which you plan a capability is all of that. You forecast what might be the world in 15 years from now, and you try and build a ship so that when it comes there, it's not obsolete entirely already. It is still capable of fighting it. So that is one thing about shipbuilding. Now, of course, the battlefield is changing fast, the character of warfare is changing very quickly, we have to adapt. The defense procurement procedure takes time, and you said that very rightly. For a lot of people who follow this, it takes time for very good reasons because, we are a democracy. There are a lot of competing interests in our budgetary allocations. We get a budget of 1.7 or 1.8, 1.9% of our GDP. We are a democracy that needs to invest in the social sector, health, education, family welfare, sports, youth, all of that. So we compete for a budget, we get our budgets. And, once again, because we're a democracy, it's public money is going to be spent responsibly and judiciously. So we got oversight. Sometimes we feel that oversight is too intrusive, it's too much, but the government doesn't feel so. The smallest things that we buy at scale, so it costs a lot of money, and also that if you buy this bottle today, you can't buy this bottle again tomorrow. You've got to wait for this to live out its life. If you buy a series of 10 ships, then you can replace those 10 ships only after the 10th ship has finished its entire useful life. So, we've got to be careful about the decisions we make. There's a consultative process. It takes time. We would like it to be shorter. We'd like to crash and collapse those timelines. Luckily for us, this is the year of reforms, where the MOD feels that we need to reform a lot of things. We've reformed a lot. We try to make processes as crisp as they can be. But I'm not justifying it. It's a tough process. We've got to go through the process. But because I've been the Vice Chief of Naval Staff, I've done this. The job of the Vice Chief of Naval Staff is to build a future Navy. So, you involve yourself in all of this. We try our best to crash those timelines. But those timelines are what they are for good reasons. We may not like them. But this is not peculiar just for the Indian Navy, by the way, or the Indian Armed Forces. This is the most democracies across the world do. But one of the things that we keep telling everybody else in the ecosystem, plenty of stakeholders, is that, while we do this and we do it in the right way, our principal adversaries in the region have no compulsions of this kind. Neither of them is a functioning democracy. And neither of them needs to be concerned of the populations. And none of them seem to be concerned about the distribution of the budget for the social sector and the rest of it. They just buy what they want, they just import what they want. We said we want to be an Atmanirbhar force, we said Atmanirbhar Bharat, we want to build everything in India. There's a cost to be paid for that. We are paying the cost happily and willingly so that we build domestic capability. But those guys don't have the compulsion, they just shop for whatever they want. So we've got to keep an eye on that, and we've got to build our capability on two tracks, which we're doing. One, of course, is to fight the here and now battles, today's battles, and one is to build the long-term capacity and capability of this country. So we're investing on both. So this is a long answer, but we invest on getting the right capability through the right indigenous sources, and we buy what we want, fight at today's battles. That's how we make the balance.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I told you at the beginning that he's a very nice person. So he also signaled as he was answering. He said he's willing to take one or two questions more. So, Yadu, you first, and there's one other. But let's have both the questions together in that case. You go ahead. And, yeah, there. Sanket, I'll come to you later. Yadu, you shoot and then Sanket.
Sir, I'm part of the Commodore's fan club. So my name is Yaduvendra. Since you mentioned Rotterdam, that's my alma mater, and the Dutch are obsessed with water. One of the things drummed into my brain is oceanic rise and ocean temperatures. So given that you've been at the sea for so long, the last 10 years and the future 10 years, do you see the threat of oceanic rise and oceanic temperature increase? Primarily because we had the Chola sessions and they're competing narratives why the Chola Navy vanished. One narrative is the climate changed.
Climate change. Sanket. Yeah, you go ahead. Yeah, she's coming. She's coming over.
So good evening, I'm Dr. Sanket, and I think it's moments like these we realize the importance of our brave sailors. So again, as everyone said, thank you so much for your service. The city is really grateful, the country is grateful to you. Sir, I'm a geopolitical analyst, so I have a very tricky mind. So
Short question.
I wanted a very...
Sanket, short question.
Okay, so when this is concerning the Iran-US-Israel war, sir. So when Iran decided to expand the scope of war by targeting the critical energy infrastructure for Gulf regions, who were technically not party to the war, does it not, from a supply chain perspective, does it not put a question mark on that country's conduct as well in the long term? Because this is going to have long-term ramifications on even the trade routes, right, sir? So just your thoughts on it. And I completely understand if you don't want to answer it.
I don't know if I'm competent to answer it. I will certainly give it a try. And I can't speak for Iran because I don't know why Iran did that. But certainly, from Iran's perspective, there's an asymmetry of interests between the United States and Israel on the one hand and Iran on the other. From what we know, Israel is continuing to attack Iran and all kinds of, facilities, military facilities, missile-making facilities, almost relentlessly. The Americans are doing that as well. The Americans and the Israelis they're fighting a war with a purpose. For Iranians, it's a war of survival. It is not a war of choice. The war has been imposed on them. From what we can read from the open source, of course, there were talks on Iran's nuclear program, and the talks were going reasonably well from Iran's perspective. And Iran seemed to be surprised by the attack on the 28th of February. And from then, the attack has been relentless. So, I'm not justifying anything, I'm just trying to think as I talk and try and explain what may have made Iran do that. Iran is fighting a war of survival after having continuously been pounded for so many days. And Iran is probably just lashing out to make the costs of the war higher for its attackers. And one of the ways of making the costs higher for the attackers is just to attack the attackers' allies. And it is a risk decision. It's a calculated decision. I think they did put out a communication saying that we're not fighting the Gulf countries, but we're fighting the Americans in the Gulf countries. But certainly, if this is a way of thinking, I'm not subscribing to it, I'm not even explaining it, but if the Gulf countries feel that in the heat of the war, America has not been able to protect them from Iranian attacks, then maybe they should rethink investing so much in America after the war is over. That may have been one of the plausible reasons. Nobody's spoken to me. I don't speak to anybody in Iran, so I can't speak for them. But it's just simple common sense. It is not geopolitics; it's common sense. The climate change. We are we're very cognizant of the risks of climate change and everything else. Global warming, of course, we've been talking, but it's not. It's not only the Indian Navy that needs to be concerned. The whole world is concerned. Where we are concerned, of course, is that the security dynamics of the Indian Ocean region might change a lot because of the rise in sea levels. There are plenty of low-lying countries in the Indian Ocean region. They look at us. Sometimes suddenly to have all those people, one of the real life problems that we have is illegal immigration of people into our country, to various countries. There are war-torn places, there are war-ravaged societies. There's a lot of illegal immigration, and some of that is what we deploy our ship against. That is going to increase. So while, of course, there are so many ramifications of seawater, the level of sea rising, there will be a security element to that, and that security element is what we have to address. So we are cognizant of what will happen there. But obviously, the whole world is battling it. On the physical level, of course, much of our shore infrastructure is likely to be submerged. That's what we expect. And much of our own physical infrastructure that we built will also likely get submerged. So we have to take corrective measures for that. I don't know whether they can reverse, but the Indian Navy is a very active participant in all national initiatives, all national programs where we can try and contain the impact of climate change and the rise of the sea level. But this is certainly worrying us. It's worrying us not just as a Navy, but it's worrying us as a nation. And so certainly we've got to get geared up for that. It requires a lot of expense. It requires a lot of corrective measures. One of the challenges of such a conversation is that while we know the direction in which we're heading, it becomes very difficult to quantify the pace at which we're going. Sometimes are we painting a doomsday scenario now? Are we a little further away from it? Can we take incremental steps to contain it, or do we need to take drastic steps? We don't know. The conversation on climate change and the impact itself, is contingent depending on where you stand and where you sit. Of course, the current world and the current MAGA America has reversed a lot of what it has done, so we don't know. But certainly, this needs a lot of international effort, and that goes much beyond the Navy. So I know this is certainly beyond my field of expertise, but I know that we talk a lot about these kind of things, that all of us need to pitch in together on this.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you'll agree with me. The canvas that he has etched today is probably both as vast and as deep as the oceans that he has traversed. So it's wonderful, and I don't think I can't do anything by way of summing, because I think he has spoken about everything, and yet leaves us wanting ye dil mange more. But all good things have to sort of come to an end. If there is one takeaway amongst the wonderful things that he talked about, I think if there's one takeaway, sir, that we'd like to do, I think it was the way you told everyone that it is their Navy, it's your Navy as much as it's ours. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have lots of reasons to be proud of our Navy, exemplified in some ways by Admiral Swaminathan. So let's have a huge round of applause for the lovely thing. And before we end, I'll of course call, do remember the books are out for the sessions. You can buy them there.